Yo, a new leak from a closed door meeting from the White House is declaring that the Trump administration wants to buy as much Bitcoin as possible. I kid you not. This is not clickbait. This is literally a Forbes article declaring this. So we're going to dive into all the details, but this should not come as a surprise whatsoever based on the language that has been coming out of not only the White House X account that says, I quote, the United States, essentially the Trump administration wants to make the United States a Bitcoin capital of the world. And also Trump, during the first ever White House crypto summit, he says that that the administration has every intention of acquiring more Bitcoin in a budget neutral fashion. So none of this is surprising, but I mean, this leak, if it was intentional, if it wasn't intentional, I think further emphasizes how serious they are. And again, if you're paying attention to what Trump said at Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville, he indicated all of this, right? So he's just following up with it, which is extremely exciting, at least from a price perspective. So could this be the biggest news of 2025, considering the number of Bitcoin on exchanges is hitting an 8-year low? So today we're going to be explaining why your chance to buy Bitcoin under 100K could be rapidly getting away from you and why you need at least 0.1 Bitcoin ASAP. Before we jump into the article, I do want to welcome our guests today. We have John Glover joining us. He is the CIO of Ledn. John, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thanks for having me, Nico. Great to be here.
Appreciate it. Let's jump straight into the article, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to share it. It's from Forbes. This isn't a YouTube title. This is a Forbes article. The Forbes article is White House leaks sparks wild speculation Trump is about to blow up the Bitcoin price. The Forbes article is coming from the Decrypt article. The Decrypt article is Trump admin wants to acquire as much Bitcoin as possible, White House. A White House official told a room of crypto industry insiders this week that the Trump administration wants to acquire as much Bitcoin as possible. At a closed-door roundtable hosted by the Bitcoin Policy Institute on Tuesday, Bo Hines, executive director of the Presidential Working Group on Digital Assets, told participants the White House is intent on acquiring as much Bitcoin as it can. When asked by someone in the room exactly how much Bitcoin the U.S. government might ultimately acquire, Hines joked the question was akin to asking someone how many dollars they want. One roundtable attendee told Decrypt. A White House official confirmed to Decrypt that Hines indeed made the statement about acquiring as much Bitcoin as possible, but added the caveat that such acquisitions would be made, quote, in a budget neutral way that doesn't cost the taxpayer a dime. The private roundtable, which followed a public, quote, Bitcoin for America policy summit hosted by Bitcoin heavyweights, including strategy co-founder Michael Saylor, Marathon Digital CEO Fred Thiel, Anchorage Digital CEO Nathan McCauley, and Bitcoin Magazine CEO David Bailey. It also featured 3 U.S. senators, including Senator Cynthia Lummis, Bill Hagerty, and Bernie Moreno. At one point during the roundtable, a participant asked Bo Hines whether the White House supports the Bitcoin Act, a piece of legislation reintroduced into the White House by the Senate. It goes on to say by the Senate on Tuesday that would require the U.S. government buy up to 1 million BTC worth roughly $80 billion and would enshrine into law the strategic Bitcoin reserve established by President Donald Trump's recent executive order. After receiving the question, according to one roundtable attendee, Hines then turned to Lummis, whom he was sat next to, and said that the White House plans to support legislation that puts a strategic Bitcoin reserve into law and will apply pressure to make sure it passes Congress. A White House official emphasized to Decrypt that Hines did not, however, endorse any specific piece of legislation during the event. It is currently estimated the U.S. government holds nearly 200,000 BTC acquired via civil and criminal forfeiture. Senior White House officials have pushed the line in recent days that they support the government purchasing additional Bitcoin to add to the strategic reserve, so long as the acquisitions are, quote, budget neutral. I think that's the key point here, everybody. And if Trump really, really wants to solidify this past his presidency, the Bitcoin Act must be passed. That was the bill that was introduced by Senator Lummis. I had a recent interview with her in Washington, D.C. Go check out that video. It's on the Simply Bitcoin channel. And here is another follow-up to see how much of these legislators, how much of these politicians are serious and committed to making the strategic Bitcoin reserve last. Remember, the infamous 6102 order that all Bitcoiners are familiar, where FDR made it illegal for American citizens to own and hold gold. That originally was an executive order that happened in 1933. It wasn't until 1934 that Congress actually codified that into law. Because when you do something via executive order, it can be reversed by the following administration. So everyone has their eyes on the Bitcoin Act by Senator Lummis. There's some other efforts too coming from the House. Check out this article from Cointelegraph. U.S. Representative Brian Donalds to introduce bill codifying Trump's Bitcoin reserve. A new bill set to be introduced in Congress aims to formalize President Donald Trump's executive order establishing a U.S. strategic Bitcoin reserve, a move that could further integrate Bitcoin into the nation's financial strategy. Trump signed an executive order on March 7th to use Bitcoin seized in government criminal cases to establish a national reserve. I mean, this is absolutely incredible news. This is extremely exciting. And again, I love how they keep doubling down on this. It has to be budget neutral, and they're doing that on purpose because they don't really have the legislative ability to just start using tax money to start buying Bitcoin. But what they can do is they could do it in a budget neutral fashion. To acquire Bitcoin via the presidency, via the executive order. Now, what I'm really excited about, and let's see what happens, let's see if Senator Lummis has the votes, is if the Bitcoin Act gets passed, and that essentially would open the door for the U.S. government to acquire up to 1 million Bitcoin. But what was really interesting during the Bitcoin Policy Summit that was hosted by Michael Saylor was that Michael Saylor and Senator Lummis was literally standing right behind Saylor when he said this. But Michael Saylor basically said in his presentation there, the keynote, he's like, that's not enough. The U.S. government should buy way more. It should double down. It should triple down, which I found absolutely hilarious. I'm also joined here today, filling in for Opti. Opti's finally taking a day off with my beautiful wife, Internet Sophie, in the house. Thanks, Sophie, for joining.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I just have one question. Is money printing neutral here, in budget neutral?
I don't know. I don't think they're. I'm going to pass it on to John. John, this is incredibly exciting news. Change in the administration, the end of Operation Choke Point 2.0. We have a favorable administration towards Bitcoin. What's your take on this?
I'm absolutely blown away. When the strategic reserve was put on the table, to me, it was really clear they were just talking about the 200,000 Bitcoin that they'd already had through seizures. And I thought, all additional seizures would just go into that strategic reserve, and it wasn't going to be really aggressive buying. For them to come out and say that they're going to aggressively buy Bitcoin is kind of mind-blowing to me. Whether they can do this in a budget neutral way, I think is going to be a really interesting question because, there's been a lot of discussion and promises about change that was going to come from the Trump administration, and that it wasn't going to add to the national debt. So it'll be interesting to see if they can do this in a budget neutral fashion. Sophie, I think your question is a great one. I don't know that printing cash is under their remit, because I'm not sure that the Trump administration can have much impact on that, and the central bankers, I think, are in control. But it'll be interesting to see how they do this. And I also thought, the comment from Saylor I found really interesting too, because number one, he's talking his book a little bit, right? The guy's got over 1% of all Bitcoin in the marketplace today, so it's like buy, and drive this price up. But you're wondering if he was aware this story was going to come out, because I watched your podcast the other day where Saylor had let it drop that Bitcoin's going to be the largest asset class in the world in 48 months. So, pretty amazing if the asset value gets up to $1 million a coin. But that would be very good for him.
He sounded so confident when he said that. He said it in a very nonchalant way. It was like and again, he's in these closed door meetings, so he's hearing those things, and it's coming out. And I'm telling you, I said leak, but it seems like it was one of those leaks where the White House couldn't fully, because I think they have their hands tied, and they have to say that it has to be in a budget neutral way. But they do want to indicate to the world that, hey, guys, we have every intention of acquiring Bitcoin. I do want to give a shout out to the stream because it's absolutely popping today. We have 976 people watching live on X, 500 people watching live on YouTube, and 500 people watching live on Rumble. So we're running out of the gate really, really fast today. John, I want to ask you a question in regards to budget neutral. What does that mean when the White House says, listen, we have every intention of acquiring Bitcoin, but it has to be done in a budget neutral fashion? What does that mean, John?
Well, to me, it means he's got to find money from elsewhere besides just the taxpayer, the U.S. taxpayer, in order to make those purchases. His tariff program is definitely pointed to that. He was talking during his campaign that he was going to make all of those countries that were, riding the coattails of the U.S. through all of the trade surpluses around the world, trade deficits for the U.S. around the world, and make them pay for that. So, maybe this is just more of the same.
Okay. So it's essentially basically like, look, we want to buy Bitcoin, but it has to be done in a way where it doesn't increase it. It's not on the U.S. taxpayer dime. What would be some of the mechanisms, John? So does that mean reallocating resources from one thing to another? Does that mean selling gold to buy Bitcoin? Because technically, if they sell gold to buy Bitcoin, that isn't a budget neutral. That is technically budget neutral. So, and again, I know we're speculating. Nothing's concrete as of yet. We don't really have any details of that. But what are your thoughts on that, John?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Nico. They got to find the money from somewhere else. That money's either going to come from reallocation of a budget that's already been approved for spending somewhere, and moving that over to purchase Bitcoin. Or, as I said, the one of the things that he's been touting for the tariffs is the money that's going to come in from the tariffs that are being imposed upon other countries are going to be used to help the U.S. taxpayer. So maybe that's going to be used to purchase Bitcoin instead. I think he's got a lot of levers he can pull in that regard, and he does want to reduce government spending. And with the efforts that Musk is doing with Doge, if he's able to find billions in savings that he's been talking about there, that billions could be reallocated to buy Bitcoin and not change the budget. So I think there's a number of things that he could possibly do.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be incredibly exciting to see how this plays out. But they're definitely signaling, make no mistake, they're definitely signaling that they have every intention of acquiring more Bitcoin. And that kind of explains Saylor's confidence when he says that. He's like, look, this is at least going to reach the market cap of gold within the next 48 months, so the next 4 years. And he said it with such confidence. So maybe Saylor knows something we don't. One of the things also, too, that we picked up on Saylor as well is he went on Legacy Media on Thursday, the day before the White House crypto summit, and the smile on his face. We were speculating that day. We played you guys a clip on Simply Bitcoin Live, and he said, look, we've never seen Saylor smile that hard before. And then the next day, you had this amazing news coming out of the White House, right? So yeah, absolutely historic. Sophie, do you have any thoughts, opinions on this? I mean, you've been at this as long as I have. You've been by my side for a while now. I think initially you thought I was crazy, but look, here we are. The White House is talking about buying Bitcoin. Sophie, what are your thoughts?
This is unreal. I never thought I'd see the day where we would be buying Bitcoin as a nation. I also think that they're definitely going to print money to to buy this Bitcoin, which, is fine. It's a cheat code. It's better than giving all of this money to foreign countries abroad. So if, that's the budget neutral that we're discussing here, if we're going to take money that we're already spending and actually buy Bitcoin with it, then I think that that's a great thing for the country. I think that's the best investment that we could make. It would also be great if we sold off some buildings that people don't work in anymore, maybe reduce the size of government, use that money to buy Bitcoin. Anything we can do to just make less government, more Bitcoin is a positive, in my opinion.
Wow. So Opti takes a day off. I'm like, okay, I got my less intense person on the show, and Sophie's more intense.
Wrong.
Sophie's more intense than Opti. Oh my God. Yeah, it's going to be really exciting to see how they do it. I don't think printing money is considered budget neutral. I don't think that's the case, right? But it is going to be quite interesting to see what happens when money printer go burr. John, I have a question to you. I have a question for you. So, we're in this environment. A lot of people were speculating. I read some amazing articles by various people in the industry. A lot of people are saying that essentially, Trump is talking about tariffs and is essentially creating uncertainty in the markets with the goal of putting pressure on the Fed to lower rates. What are your thoughts on that?
I think he's got a number of reasons he's doing it. One, I think number one, he's trying to renegotiate all the trade deals with all the countries around the world that he's putting tariffs on. I sit up here in Canada, so I can, it's been a big topic of discussion here, not just the tariffs, but the fact that he keeps referring to Canada as the 51st state, et cetera, which is his kind of negotiating tactics. So I think that's a big reason that he's doing it. The pressure on the Fed to reduce rates, I'm not sure that that's going to be the outcome that he's looking for, because the tariffs are going to be inflationary, at least to start with, and probably in the near term, which puts a lot of pressure on the Fed to not cut rates as inflation pressures are going up. So I'm not really sure that his desired outcome from the tariffs is going to be realized in terms of reduced rates, at least in the short run. As a matter of fact, if you look at the futures markets right now, all of the cuts that were priced in for this year are gone, and there are potential hikes being priced in now towards the end of the year in 2026. So I don't think we're going to see the pressure, the downward pressure on rates that he was hoping for from tariffs.
Gotcha. Well, guys, if you guys are enjoying the show, we're about to break 2,000 live viewers between YouTube and X. Smash that like button. We have 582 live viewers on Rumble. If you guys are enjoying Simply Bitcoin live so far, smash that like button and help us break 300 likes within the first 30 minutes of the show. We're already at 150 likes. Help us break 300 likes within the first 30 minutes. Guys, we have a jam-packed show for you guys. Tons of content to cover. We're going to be playing clips from the Bitcoin Policy Summit. We have a clip of Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary for the Trump administration, talking about this idea that Trump's been talking about this, moving the Overton window. They're talking about auditing Fort Knox. Elon's in there with Doge. And once again, you're hearing this talk of ending certain income tax. So Howard Lutnick, on a legacy media interview, he said that that the Trump administration has the goal of essentially ending tax for anybody who makes less than a certain amount every year. So is this going to happen? I don't know. But in terms of moving the Overton window, it's absolutely moving. That's for sure. And then during the news segment, we're going to be talking about Russia. Russia apparently is using cryptocurrencies, I'm sure the majority of which is Bitcoin, for oil trade. I mean, this is something that we've been talking about for a very, very long time. Bitcoin is an open, censorship-resistant monetary network that's global, that's worldwide. So this doesn't surprise me whatsoever. And of course, during the culture segment, we're going to take advantage of the fact that we have the CIO of Ledn, John Glover, joining us today. And we're going to be talking about all things Ledn. So it's an incredible show for you guys, incredibly jam-packed. And if you guys are enjoying it so far, make sure to smash that like button. Anyways, before we move on to the numbers, I do want to give a very special shout out to Simply Bitcoin's lead sponsor, the best place to build your automatic self-custody Bitcoin Bitcoin stack. Bitcoinwell.com. It's a publicly traded company coming out of Canada that recently expanded to all 50 US states. Enable your independence today with the fastest and safest way to buy Bitcoin on chain or via the Lightning Network in Canada and the USA. To get started, you put in your email address. It takes 2 to 5 minutes to sign up. And what makes Bitcoin Well different and very special from all the rest is that it's a completely non-custodial platform. What does that mean? That means that when you buy Bitcoin on Bitcoin Well, as soon as the funds clear, it goes straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet address. If you're a higher net worth individual looking to buy $50,000 worth of Bitcoin or more, check out Bitcoin Well Infinite. Invest in Bitcoin, preserve your wealth. Bitcoin Well Infinite enables large Bitcoin investments personalized for you and your business. Again, you're going to have a dedicated Bitcoin Well representative every time you want to buy or sell Bitcoin. Head over to bitcoinwell.com/OTC to get started. And if you're an American, I believe this has been live in Canada for a while now, you can get paid in Bitcoin sent directly to your personal Bitcoin wallet. Share your Bitcoin Well direct deposit details with your employer, set your Bitcoin/dollar split, and receive sats instead of fiat with every paycheck. Head over to bitcoinwell.com/simply today. If you use promo code SimplyBTC, again, SimplyBTC, to sign up to bitcoinwell.com, you get 3 tosses into the Bitcoin wishing well absolutely free. And with every toss, you have an opportunity to win up to 1 million Satoshis. All right, everybody, let's head to the numbers. We have tons to talk about today. We'll be right back.
I want to tell you guys about our sponsor, Stampseed. Is your Bitcoin in cold storage really secure? Are your seed words really secure? Stampseed's do-it-yourself kit has everything you'll need to hammer your seed words into commercial-grade titanium plates instead of writing them down on paper. Don't do that. Paper sucks. You want to literally stamp your seed into this plate of titanium. Your words are actually stamped into the metal plate with this hammer. So once your words are in, they aren't going anywhere. No risk of the plate breaking apart and your pieces falling everywhere. Titanium stamp seeds will survive nearly triple the heat produced by a house fire. They are also crush-proof, waterproof, non-corrosive, and most importantly, because this is generational wealth, time-proof. All things that paper is not, allowing you to hodl your Bitcoin for the long haul. I mean, here is the plate that they crushed. They put in water, they put a blowtorch to it, and as you can see, the words have survived. Stamp your seed on Stampseed. And you can use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on their store. Head over to stampseed.com today.
All right, everybody, we are back. Make sure to smash that like button. By the way, you can scan the QR code on your screen right now. You get 15% off anything on the Stampseed website. Head over to stampseed.com today. Store your generational wealth properly. Stamp it into titanium. Stamp your seed phrase into titanium. At the time of recording, the Bitcoin price is $84,710. Block height, 887,795. Sats per dollar, 1,181. Market cap, 1.68 trillion. Bitcoin versus gold market cap, 7.93%. Percentage issued, 94.46%. Decline from all-time high. You get a 22% discount if you buy the dip right now. And my favorite stat out of all of this, because it continues to take fiat currencies to absolute school, the realized monetary inflation rate is currently sitting at 0.93%. Even if fiat currencies get back to 2%, Bitcoin is still way better. And it's going to continue to go down forever. When we started covering this stat was at like 3. You know, it's crazy how far down it's come. Anyhow, here's a clip of a U.S. congressman at the Bitcoin Policy Summit. Some interesting things that he says regarding self-custody. Let's check it out.
This initiative is designed to be fiscally responsible. Not a single taxpayer dollar will be used. Instead, we will leverage Federal Reserve remittances, which exceeded $76 billion in 2023, gold certificate revaluations unlocking additional funds to finance Bitcoin purchases, and the Exchange Stabilization Fund, a fund with the mandate to manage currencies outside of the United States dollar. Bitcoin is open, it is censorship resistant, it is immune to geopolitical manipulation, and it embodies the principles of economic freedom, innovation, and self-determination that define America's leadership. I want to be very clear about one thing. The Bitcoin Act does not infringe on private ownership of Bitcoin. It explicitly protects the rights of individuals and businesses to own, hold, and transact Bitcoin freely. It recognizes self-custody as a fundamental right of financial sovereignty. This bill affirms that Americans should never fear government overreach.
So, I mean, it's, you know, again, we went from thinking that our industry was essentially going to be shut down last year to a complete 180, where the White House is basically indicating that they have every intention to buy Bitcoin. And then at least in Congress, too, they're saying, listen, we're going to pass a bill not only for the U.S. government to buy Bitcoin, but it actually protects your right as an individual to take self-custody as well. There were some dark times last year with Operation Choke Point 2.0. Many Bitcoin companies were debanked. The attack on the Bitcoin mining industry, you could say a lot of the arrests, you could say were politically motivated. You can make an argument for that. So, the arrests of the Samurai wallet developers, the attack on privacy, like it was some dark times, right? And this election was absolutely historic, and it just, completely changed things around. And again, I want to emphasize too that Bitcoin should not be a partisan issue. And hopefully, with the results of this recent election, you could also make a very solid argument that, potentially being so anti-Bitcoin, anti-crypto might have caused cost the opposing party the election. You could make that argument, right? Because a big part of their voting demographic is the younger generation. The younger generation tends to hold a lot of Bitcoin and crypto, right? So yeah, I mean, hopefully, this doesn't become a partisan issue. Hopefully, this becomes a bipartisan thing where both parties support it. And I think the passing of the Bitcoin Act would send shockwaves all across the world, because essentially every country would be put in a position where they would have to buy Bitcoin for fear of being left behind by the United States, right? So very, very positive, at least from a price perspective. But I love how he emphasized, hey, listen, self-custody is going to be protected by this law as well. And again, self-custody is incredibly important in Bitcoin. And that's absolutely incredible from a moving the Overton window perspective. I'm going to pass it on to John. John, you were working at a Bitcoin business last year. From a regulatory perspective, how were things on your end?
Oh, it was tough. We got debanked, as you mentioned, and so that was really caused a big challenge for us. Industry, so that was damaging to all crypto companies, regardless of what they did. So we impacted by that as well. But here when we started to see the Bitcoin price rally, that was really kind of based on what was happening in the polls and the statements that were coming out of the Trump administration, or the Trump camp while they were campaigning, just set everything back on course again. And it's been an incredible year. We've seen volumes go way up. We've been able to help a lot of people access some liquidity from their Bitcoin holdings around the world. And, we've seen a lot of the bad companies that didn't survive because they were doing things poorly back in 2022, 23, now being replaced by other companies that are doing things the right way. So I think the ecosystem as a whole is in a much better position than it was.
Absolutely, 100%. Sophie, do you want to follow that up?
I mean, I couldn't have really said it better myself. I think that addressing the issue of self-custody is going to be incredibly important. And, the most fiscally responsible thing that this country can do is just buy more Bitcoin. I think Saylor is right in saying that we're not buying enough, but at least we're on the way to codifying it into law. And I think that as Bitcoin goes up, the government is just going to be more and more incentivized to come together in a bipartisan coalition for Bitcoin.
I think that's an incredible take. And what I'll say too is, I think I think it's important to remember as well is like, great from a number grow up perspective. I think it's going to be incredible if the U.S. government starts buying Bitcoin. But I think it's important to remember, the importance of self custody. Right. I think self custody is incredibly important as an individual. Of course, you can use many different products. Where you give up custody. But again, I think your core holdings should be in self-custody. None of that should change. Like just because there's ETFs, just because there's MicroStrategy and you can, buy Bitcoin through your Charles Schwab account, I still think that nothing replaces spot Bitcoin in your own self-custody, in my opinion. And I'm really, really glad that part of this bill is going to explicitly protect that, right? That's incredibly important. So the next clip I do want to share is a clip from Howard Lutnick. Again, he is the Commerce Secretary for the Trump administration. And again, Trump has been saying this for many months now. They're moving the Overton window slowly. The Overton window, for anyone who's new to Simply Bitcoin, I say this almost every day, is essentially the acceptable window, the acceptable window of discourse, right? So if you mentioned the idea of self-custody, 2 or 3 years ago, it was radical. If you mentioned the idea of Bitcoin, it was radical. So every time, you have these types of things being said publicly, it moves the Overton window like ever so slightly. And our goal as Bitcoiners is to move that Overton window to the point where Bitcoin is normalized. Like the idea of Bitcoin is normalized. The idea of self-custody Bitcoin is normalized. The ethos of Bitcoin is normalized. And I think, it's moving slowly. It's moving in the right direction. And I think this is another example of that, essentially questioning the income tax. It's like, look, like what's going on here? And specifically, the income tax for people making under a certain amount. So here's the clip from, I believe this was 60 Minutes or this was just a CBS interview. Let's check it out.
Is to have external revenue. The way I think about it, we all are so used to paying taxes. We're so used to it. We have like Stockholm syndrome. Don't stop the Internal Revenue Service, God forbid. How about this? The rest of the world leans on our economy, breathes off our economy. Not only is our economy $29 trillion GDP, but we consume $20 trillion a year. We are the buyer of everybody's stuff. We buy everybody's stuff. So who's more important, the people who sell stuff or the people who buy stuff? So we are the buyer of everybody's commodities, products, goods and services. Everything comes from us, right? Let them pay a membership fee. We all understand that model. Let them pay. How about we, you and I, and every single person we know pay less? How about no tax on tips? How about no tax on overtime? How about no Social Security? How about all those things? These are the kind of thoughts that will change America. I know what his goal is. No tax for anybody who makes less than $150,000 a year. That's his goal.
So that's incredible. So let's put the political talk aside for a second, but let's focus on the tax component of it, right? Which is this idea of ending the income tax. A lot of people in the U.S. forget that the Federal Reserve was established 1913, which was the same year that the federal income tax was introduced as well. Do you think that's a coincidence? Maybe. But again, in terms of moving the Overton window, I think it's incredibly the Trump administration has been incredibly successful. Now, in terms of pissing a lot of people off worldwide with all this talk of tariffs, I think they've definitely done that as well. But, again, as a Bitcoiner, that knows the history of money, that knows the history of central banking, that knows the history of the Federal Reserve, you're listening to that and you're like, wow, I think a lot of people are waking up. And they're starting to ask the question, what is money? And again, like once Elon was discovering all this stuff with Doge, it's funny how that works, right? So, essentially government is allowed to audit you whenever they want. If they, they feel like you're not paying your taxes correctly, they could audit you. But when Elon went in there and started auditing the government, they're screaming from the rooftops and saying, "Hey, what the hell is going on here?" Right? So, anyways, I want to get John's thoughts on this. John, other than the talk of the political talk in the beginning, what are your thoughts about the income tax? Is that even possible? Can a modern government run without people paying income tax?
Well, I mean, if you look back to the history of income tax, it was a temporary measure to help fund wars, that temporary measure has become absolutely ingrained in everyday life. And I know as Americans, you hate income tax. You try being Canadian, you hate income tax a whole lot more because our income taxes are a hell of a lot higher up here. So I'm a big fan in the challenge to the Overton window. I'm a big fan of, looking for alternative ways to fund essential government services. And I'm really keen on somebody going in and determining what really is essential in terms of government services. As much as I'm not a big fan of governments and I'd love governments to be a lot smaller, there's just more efficiency in having a centralized body take care of some things, whether it's at a municipal level or at a state level or at a federal level. And that needs to be paid for by something. But I don't necessarily think it needs to be paid for off the backs of, the typical working class citizen who's really not the one who can afford to do that. So any change that can be done to the tax system, I think, is going to be a positive change if that ends up in lowering taxes overall. And efficiency is a huge part of that.
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, John. So essentially, and what a lot of people don't know as well is that the vast majority of income tax is actually paid by, or maybe not the vast majority, but the majority or a big chunk of the income tax is actually paid by the 1% tax bracket, right? The top 1% of the income pays a big portion of the income tax. So I agree. Like if you're making 150K a year, you're making 100K or 50K a year, you need all of that money to live, right? It makes a dent on your lifestyle, on your ability to save for the future, on your ability to pay for your family. But if you're making a couple $1 million a year, $1 million a year, again, it's not going to be as impactful. Right. The taxes, a lot of people still disagree with it. Okay, this and that. But I think Howard Lutnick is absolutely spot on regarding especially the lower tax brackets. The people making less income, they need all of that money. Is it really efficient for that money to go to the government? Okay, I agree with you, John. I think that the government is necessary in some respects, but it definitely needs to be a much smaller government. I think it's reached such a size that the inefficiencies of government are becoming apparent for anyone who's paying attention. So let's see what happens. It's incredibly exciting. Yeah. So usually I get a little bit worried when I pass it on to Opti when it regards to these types of subjects. But now that I know Sophie's in the hot seat, Sophie, what are your thoughts?
Look, I don't want to use your own tweets against you, but my favorite tweet that you've ever had was when you said, we started the conversation with what is money, and now we're going to end the conversation with what is government. And I think that DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, has really tackled that question and made it so that we can reduce that government and kind of ask the question, why are we paying so many taxes? Taxes, especially the income tax, is particularly evil because it de-incentivizes people from doing a good job. And so when you take that away, when you actually give people the incentive to do a good job and to be the best that they can be, you're living up to the best values of capitalism. And when you take that money and you store it in the hardest money that there has ever been, then you actually you have a more productive and well-meaning society. So I love that they're taking these steps to reduce the income tax. I believe it's for people
to be clear. So there hasn't been any legislation introduced yet to reduce the income tax, but they are moving the Overton window.
Right.
The fact that
it's being talked about. They're talking about doing this for people who are earning under $150,000. So right off the bat, that's great. But I think they need to take it a little further. because like I said, or how you said, it's the top 1% that pays the majority of our taxes.
I want to verify that while you keep talking, Sophie. I want to verify. I actually want to pull the actual data of what the breakdown is.
And you also have Florida talking about reducing the property tax, not abolishing it completely, but definitely reducing it so that you aren't in danger of losing your home. So, like I said, because we've started to involve Bitcoin in government, we've ended up, by, I think, no coincidence, making government more efficient and, having a better store of wealth, talking about abolishing taxes. These are all the things that happen when you start to slowly adopt Bitcoin. And, of course, El Salvador is the best example of this. Look at how they cleaned up their crime rate. I don't think that there is a coincidence here. I think that when you have better incentives, that leads to a better society as a whole.
I think that's an incredible point. Yeah, absolutely. You fix the incentive structure and things start to work out better for sure. So I just want to read the breakdown. I asked ChatGPT in the background while Sophie was talking. So the top 1% of earners, so people who are making 540,000 or more, pay about 45% of all federal income tax. The top 10% of earners pay 75% of federal income tax. The bottom 50% only pay about 2 to 3% of the federal income tax. Why don't we get rid of the people on the, why do we get rid of that? They need it the most, right? It makes absolutely no sense from a percentage perspective. So I think, Sophie, you made incredible points. John, do you have any thoughts before we move on to the next segment?
Well, I think another really important point that supports your argument there, Nico, is that the people who are in the kind of the lower income earner, they're also the ones who consume a lot, because they don't tend to save. They tend to be spenders. And so if you save them their tax dollars, those tax dollars are going back into the economy for the most part. They'll invest, they'll buy Bitcoin, they'll do some with it, but they tend to spend whatever additional funds they have available to them. So it's not like this is going to damage the economy if you get rid of taxes for those people. So they're going to inject it back into the economy. So it's, overall, even though it's tough, and that can be absorbed by the higher income earners very easily.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. I want to give a shout out to the live stream. We're at 3,000 live viewers between X and YouTube, 727 live viewers on YouTube, and 572 live viewers on Rumble. If you guys are enjoying Simply Bitcoin Live, make sure to smash that like button. We're about to blow past our goal of 300 likes within the beginning of the show. So I'm gonna up that. I'm gonna up the goal. Let's try to break 400 likes by the time the show ends. So smash that like button if you guys are enjoying Simply Bitcoin Live. For today, we're gonna hit the news segment. We have tons to talk about. We're gonna be talking about Russia essentially using cryptocurrencies for oil trade. We're going to be exploring the article by Reuters. And then during the culture segment, we're going to take advantage of the fact that we have John Glover in the house. John Glover is the CIO of Ledn. So we're going to be talking about all things Bitcoin loans and Ledn as well. So we'll be right back in just a second.
I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Casa. Bitcoin security matters, but managing private keys can sometimes be complicated, especially multi-sig. What if you can secure your Bitcoin without worrying about losing a seed phrase or giving up custody? With Casa, you can completely control your Bitcoin with multi-key security, so even if one key is lost or stolen, your funds stay safe. No single point of failure, no stress. That's what I absolutely love about these guys. They make taking Bitcoin into self-custody incredibly easy with their best in industry user experience through their app. I've been personally recommending Casa for years now to my friends and family because they will get all the benefits of multi-key self-custody security without the hassle of having to learn complicated UI. And if you're thinking of one day passing on your Bitcoin to the next generation, their inheritance plan has you covered. Also, if you're a business looking to add Bitcoin to your treasury, do it the secure way with Casa for Business. To get started, go to casa.io today and get 5% off Casa Standard or Casa Premium with promo code SIMPLY. Need liquidity without having to sell your Bitcoin? For more than 6 years now, Ledn has been the trusted choice for Bitcoin-backed lending with transparency, security, and trust at their core. I absolutely love these guys, and I personally have not only an account with them, but also a loan. And some of the key features that I love about Ledn is the fact that there are no monthly payments. You pay at the end of the term. You also have the ability to roll over the loan as well, and you can pay it back whenever you want. Essentially what they do is that they help their clients unlock the liquidity of their BTC, allowing you to hodl while still accessing the wealth of your Bitcoin. They've been battle tested with their focus on transparency, security, and trust, allowing them to build a proven track record of client success and security, helping tens of thousands of clients harness the value of their digital assets with confidence and peace of mind. Learn more about what your BTC can do for you. Check out ledn.io today.
All right, everybody, we are back. Before we jump into the news, Sophie just reminded me, guys, the new Simply Bitcoin merch just dropped. Sophie is wearing it right now. She's wearing the very comfortable hoodie with the Simply Bitcoin logo and everything. It's absolutely awesome. It's incredibly comfortable. We should have ordered more. This is not drop ship. We literally order the inventory. We keep the inventory and then we ship it out. Not drop shipped at all. And we really, really pay attention to quality. It literally says, like, if you look at the tags, it says Simply Bitcoin. The quality is incredible. The hoodie's incredibly comfortable, but you got to get yours while supplies last because this has been flying off the shelves since we made this go live. So if you guys want to support the show, we get this message all the time. If you guys want to support the show, first of all, check out our partners. Second, you can buy our merch, and that really, really means the world to us. So anyways, no more delay. Let's jump into today's news segment. The headline for the audio listeners is Russia leans on cryptocurrencies for oil trade. It goes on to say, Russia is using cryptocurrencies in its oil trade with China and India to skirt Western sanctions, according to four sources with direct knowledge of the matter. While Russia has publicly encouraged the use of crypto and last summer passed a law to allow digital currency payments in international trade, its use in the country's oil trade has not previously been reported. Some Russian oil companies are using Bitcoin, Ether, and stablecoins such as Tether to smooth the conversion of Chinese yuan and Indian rupees to Russian rubles, the sources said, adding that it is a small but growing part of Russia's overall oil trade, which according to the International Energy Agency was worth about 192 billion last year. All the sources declined to be identified due to the sensitivity of the matter. Cryptocurrencies have already helped enable countries under U.S. sanctions such as Iran and Venezuela to keep their economies running while avoiding use of the dollar, the preferred currency for transactions in the global oil market. Russia's move comes after Venezuela accelerated its use of digital currency in crude and fuel exports after Washington imposed sanctions. Russia has set up a variety of systems, and USDT is just one of them, said a fifth source, a researcher at an investigations firm which tasked the use of cryptocurrencies for sanctions circumvention, who asked not to be named because of an NDA. The Russian central bank did not respond to a request for comment. It said last year that delays in payments due to sanctions have become a major challenge for the Russian economy. U.S. President Donald Trump is seeking to improve relations with Russia as he pushes to end the war in Ukraine, but whether sanctions will be lifted remains unclear. Reuters reported that the White House was drafting options for sanctions relief, but Trump posted on March 7th that he is strongly considering more sanctions on Russia. Crypto will likely continue to be used in in Russian oil trading. One of the 4 sources said, even if sanctions are lifted, the dollar can be used again. It is a convenient tool and helps run operations faster. And an example of how the trade works, a Chinese buyer of Russian oil pays a trading company acting as a middleman in yuan into an offshore account. 2 of the sources with knowledge of the transaction said the middleman converts this into crypto and transfer it to another account, and from there it is sent to a third account in Russia converted to rubles. For one Russian oil trader's sales to from one Russian oil trader's sales to China, crypto transactions are in the tens of millions of dollars per month, according to one of the sources who is familiar with the trader's operations. Traditional currencies still account for the bulk of Russia's oil transactions, with other workarounds, including the use of the UAE dirham, for example. One Russian crypto exchange, Gantex, was placed under U.S. sanctions in 2022 by the European Union last month. The platform suspended services last week after Tether blocked digital wallets on its platform. So what's really interesting to me about this article, again, is you always hear that, Bitcoin has no use case. That was like one of the narratives that you always hear, like Bitcoin has no use case. Bitcoin isn't going to be used by anyone. It's volatile. It's this and this and that. Forget about the whole Russia situation, but I've heard from many other countries, like there's this story of this woman in Afghanistan who was essentially using Bitcoin because she's not allowed to open a bank account, which is absolutely incredible. You hear stories like where Sophie and I are originally from. You hear stories of people in Venezuela. Essentially, they want to leave the country. They can't do it using the traditional system. And what they do is they put all their wealth in Bitcoin, they take it into self-custody, and then they leave. I've heard that story multiple times, over and over and over again. Now, of course, sometimes you get, sometimes you get hostile governments, right? Like obviously, the war in Ukraine is absolutely horrible. What's happening with Russia, but I think a lot of people get caught up in the sanctions, right? Like Sophie and I were from South Florida. And, Cuba is very, very close. And, the U.S. has had sanctions against the Cuban government for a long time. But what a lot of people don't talk about is the indirect consequence of that is the Cuban people. The Cuban people are limited, like in their ability to access dollars. The Cuban people are limited in their ability to open a U.S. dollar bank account, right? And that's where really Bitcoin comes in. Right. So, yes, that is the recent news. Right. And again, it's not surprising. I've said this for many, many years now, specifically when the war broke out. I said, look, eventually, they're going to wake up to the reality. They're going to be able to use an open monetary network. And one of the quotes that I love about Jeff Booth that has really stuck with me is like, the thing about Bitcoin is that you're going to have to be okay with even your worst enemy using the network. And there's pros and there's cons to that. I think the pros are the things to highlight because for the first time, if you live in a totalitarian country, you have the ability to not only save, but you have the ability to vote with your feet because you could take your wealth with you. And that is absolutely incredibly powerful. So that's what I want to focus on. I'm going to pass it on to John. John, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, it's not surprising. It's not surprising, but I want to focus on the stories of hope. I want to focus on the stories of the individual people living in these countries because it's always about governments, right? It's like this government did that, this government did that. But what's never talked about is the collateral damage. What's never talked about is the people in those countries, the individuals of those countries, which the vast majority are innocent. They're just like you and me trying to get by. And they get caught up sometimes with when this stuff, when all this politicking is happening. So John, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's really why Ledn was formed. One of our co-founders, Maurizio, is Venezuela himself, and saw the challenges people had in trying to save money, and that's why he became a Bitcoin miner and improved his life and his family's life. But then the other thing is there's no banking system, there's no ability for the average person to access any banking services. And that's really was the genesis of Ledn, was to help people do that. And you're absolutely right, Nico. We talk about trying to keep governments in control or keep other countries in control through sanctions. We really seldom talk about the impact on the people that those decisions have. And sanctions, may be effective from a trade perspective or an economic perspective, but they're almost always devastating for the individuals living in those countries. And so when you look at Russia getting around that, or Venezuela getting around the sanctions using Bitcoin, it's just logical. They're just continuing to do their business. The locals are continuing to try and thrive and continue to try and live their life in a positive fashion, and they'll find ways to do that. And Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general, but Bitcoin specifically, is a solution to that. And I love that statement that you've got to be happy doing, being on the network with people you don't like. Bitcoin is agnostic to all of that, and it'll allow us to pursue our own goals without, really caring what governments are doing to each other and to other countries. So I think it's an incredible. It'd be really great if governments just kind of stepped aside and let things move the way they should. But I like your focus on the positivity, Nico.
Thank you. I appreciate it, John. And because that's what people forget, right? Like, it's like this is world, this is what you hear in the headlines, like Russia, like Cuba, like whatever. It's like, no. The Russian government, the Cuban government, but the vast majority of people in Russia or in Cuba, they're just trying to get by. They're just trying to put food on the table, right? Like, why are they stuck? They're stuck in between this, international, thing that's happening. But in reality, they're just like you and I, right? So that's really, really important. And I think that's where Bitcoin shines, because Bitcoin is hope, and Bitcoin provides, the opportunity for to save and also to interact with the global economy too, right? Like, a lot of people were not able to do that before the introduction of Bitcoin. They're kind of like stuck within their own local fiat currency kind of economy, and it was complicated to send money and remittances and all that stuff. So yeah, it's it's incredibly hopeful depending on how you look at it. I'm on a Bitcoin standard, so I'm very hopeful about the future. That's what Bitcoin does. Anyway, Sophie, what are your thoughts specifically regarding Venezuela? I know we're both from there. I know you definitely have a little bit more stories than I do. Sophie, what are your thoughts?
I love that individuals can rely on Bitcoin to overcome the sanctions, of course. Initially, when you were reading that story on Russia, the first thing I thought is, wow, the United States actually needs to baby drill, and Donald Trump needs to come up on that promise and sell oil for Bitcoin. That's another budget neutral way that the country can be acquiring Bitcoin and compete with Venezuela, because what's happening is that Bitcoin is going straight to the Venezuelan government. But then I thought, Bitcoin, as you said, is for enemies, but it's also for the individuals overcoming the sanctions. So what happens when those individuals start to demand that the government start paying them in Bitcoin? That kind of levels the playing field, right? It actually reminds me of the Second Amendment in this country and how firearms create a polite society. When everybody has equal access to currency, and they all have the power, they don't have the power to create it for free, you actually level the playing field, and you level the amount of corruption that the government can get away with. It reduces the size of government inherently, because you are all able to provide value and take control of society.
I was like, okay, I don't have Opti on the show today. The radicalness is not going to happen today. We're going to be fine. But Sophie comes in swinging, which is absolutely hilarious.
Be careful.
Oh man. So guys, we still have a loaded show for you guys. We're going to transition to the culture segment, where we're going to be talking to John Glover. John Glover is the CIO of Ledn, and we're going to be talking about all things Ledn. Drop your questions in the chat. We'll be able to ask John. So we'll be right back after this quick commercial break.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, HIVE Digital Technologies. As the first ever public miner, HIVE's positioned to quadruple their global footprint in 2025. And as the first with an AI strategy, HIVE continues to make moves in sustainable, high-performance computing. They consistently top the industry in Bitcoin mined per exahash, and now they're headquartered in the USA. They're leaning and mean, they're green and clean, and they're changing the game. You can catch the latest buzz by following them at HIVE Digital Tech or check out their website at hivedigitaltech.com. I want to give a shout out to our partner, CoinKite. If you take your Bitcoin security seriously, you'll need the best Bitcoin hardware wallet on the market to take self-custody. That's where Cold Card comes in. The Cold Card Q is the most advanced Bitcoin signing device ever made. It's got a full keyboard, larger screen, and NFC support, making air-gap signing easier than ever. It's built for power users who want the ultimate security without sacrificing usability. And if you're looking for a battle-tested, uncompromising cold storage, the Cold Card MK4 is your go-to with PSBT signing, an industrial-grade secure element, and USB-C. It's the perfect blend of security and convenience. Both devices are, of course, 100% Bitcoin only, open source, and built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. Secure your Bitcoin the right way with the Cold Card Q and the MK4. Head over to coldcard.com today and use promo code SIMPLY to get 5% off anything on the store.
All right, everybody, we are back. I do want to give a shout out to the live show. Holy cow, 3,000 live viewers on Rumble. Let's break down the other 2,700 live viewers on X and 647 live viewers on YouTube. If you guys are enjoying the show, make sure to smash that like button. We're on the verge of hitting our goal on YouTube. We're at 367 likes. Let's see if we can hit 450 likes by the end of the show. So if you guys are enjoying the show so far, smash that like button. Anyways, we are joined with John. John is the CIO of Ledn. He is our guest for today. We're going to talk about all things Ledn. So John, I'm going to pass it on to you. What is Ledn? Who's it for? Why should people look into it?
Yeah, thanks, Nico. So Ledn is a lender where we lend retail clients dollars against their Bitcoin collateral. It gives people a way of taking their idle assets and being able to monetize those without having to sell their Bitcoin. So you can continue to hodl. You can avoid capital gains tax if you're in a country that has capital gains tax, and so it allows you to use your Bitcoin to pay for everyday expenses, or to go on a trip, or to start a business, or to buy a house, or whatever it may be. We have clients in 127 countries around the world, and so it doesn't matter U.S. or Ireland or South Africa. You're going to be borrowing at the same rate as anyone else. Whereas if you consider interest rates being paid by someone in Venezuela right now, I think interest rates in Venezuela are like 38% if you can even access them. So it really does kind of level that playing field. We also have an earn product where you can earn on stable coins. So where your bank is going to pay you maybe 1.5 or 2%. We're paying 7.5 to 8.5% for stable coins. Those stable coins are utilized to help fund our retail loan book. So it's being used in a very, very safe manner because all of that is over collateralized. And so it's a way for people to be able to utilize their Bitcoin to deal with real world expenses.
I love that. And let's talk about that too, John, because I think that's very, very interesting, right? The idea that everyone is getting the same rate regardless of their jurisdiction. That's awesome. And I think that could only happen with Bitcoin. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, because it allows us to take the funding that we get in wealthy countries like in the US and be able to use that to fund loans in Venezuela or wherever it may be, whereas those people in Venezuela don't have access to that capital. So Bitcoin allows us to do that because Bitcoin is used as the collateral, and then the blockchain is used as the distribution methodology. So it's allowed for a leveling of the financial playing field. and allowed people to hold on to that Bitcoin asset that they want in order to build wealth, but still be able to, to meet their payments that they need to make. So it's been, it's been great to be a part of it. We've done, I think we've done over 60,000 loans now and over $1.2 billion worth of, and it continues to grow as people continue to find utility in that.
And let's talk a little bit about the because I think this was, this is perhaps a little bit radical for people. So, the idea of, and we talk about this during the ad that we read for you guys, like the idea of being able to tap into the wealth of your Bitcoin without selling your Bitcoin. Like, how does that work? Like, what is the advantage of taking out a loan versus selling your Bitcoin, other than, of course, when you take out a loan, there's no tax on it because it's a loan, it's not income. Other than that, like, what are the advantages, John?
So, I mean, there's a couple of them. Number one, I think all of us on this channel are huge believers in Bitcoin, huge believers that the value of Bitcoin is going to continue to go up. And so this allows you to hold on to that Bitcoin while taking a loan against it versus selling your Bitcoin and then maybe missing the opportunity for the price rally. And then number two is, if you've held Bitcoin for a long time, as a number of the people on this podcast have, your purchase price is a lot lower than the current price. So if you were to sell that, you're going to be hit with capital gains tax. And, we've been talking about tax and the challenge that tax, incurs upon people in their inability to continue building wealth. So it's a way to avoid that taxable event, hold on to your Bitcoin, but still get utility of it by being able to borrow against it to make, make payments that you need to.
Love that. Love that. And so let's talk about the process, right? So I know a question that we got the other day was, will they run my credit, right? What is the process of initiating a loan at Ledn.io, John?
So we don't do any credit checks on individuals. And the reason for that is that you're over collateralizing your loan. So if you want to borrow $10,000, you need to place $20,000 worth of Bitcoin on collateral with Ledn, and so we don't need to, because we're secure. So we're not being secured by your creditworthiness; we're being secured by your Bitcoin. And it's a very, very simple process. You go onto Ledn.io, you register, you get a wallet address, you send your Bitcoin to the wallet address, and your loan is funded within 24 hours.
And so, okay, so you send your Bitcoin as collateral, and then you get a cash, essentially just cash wired directly to your bank account. And that sounds great. What are the downsides? Like, what should people really pay attention to, especially because Bitcoin is an extremely volatile asset?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, there is a chance that your Bitcoin is going to be sold, and that Bitcoin, the only way that will happen is if you hit your liquidity LTV. So the LTV is your loan to value. So the loan to value starts at 50%, which means you're placing double the amount of Bitcoin as the size of the loan. If Bitcoin prices drop, that loan to value is going to creep higher. If it hits 70%, we send you notifications saying your loan is getting up towards liquidation thresholds. You may want to top up or pay down part of your loan. We also have some tools that allow you to do that within the platform. If it ever hits an 80% loan to value, which means Bitcoin prices come off significantly and you haven't added more collateral, then your collateral will be sold in an amount sufficient to pay back the loan and interest owing, and the balance of the Bitcoin will be returned to you. So when we look at the behavior of our clients, and we've had lots of big sell-offs in Bitcoin over the last 6 years, as you can imagine, that would have been liquidity events. The vast majority of our clients add more collateral to avoid being liquidated, because they want to maintain the loan, they want to keep their Bitcoin secure. So that's the downside, is if you don't keep that healthy, there is a chance that your Bitcoin is going to be sold to repay the loan. So when you look at it like any other kind of asset-backed loan, so look at it like a mortgage. You're putting your house up against the mortgage. If you fail to repay the mortgage, the bank takes your house. In this case, we're not taking your entire asset. we're just taking the amount to repay your obligation to us, and you get the balance back. So it's very similar to a mortgage that you would take out on your house. And I've seen some commentary in the chat about the rates being high. The rates are high, and I can tell you the reason why. And when I say high, they're high relative to somebody who's got access to go and get a mortgage in the U.S. And mortgage rates in the U.S. are right now, I think, somewhere around 5 or 6%. I'm not. It depends where you are, and that's a good low rate because you're dealing with banks that have federal deposit insurance, and they're backstopped by the U.S. government. So your tax dollars are backstopping your mortgage loan. That doesn't exist in Bitcoin because there is no central authority for Bitcoin, which is why it's such a fantastic asset class. But it also means that we don't have that insurance of the government stepping in to bail us out if there's a problem. The other reason that rates are higher than in traditional finance rates is we haven't had to date a lot of traditional finance players coming in to be willing to fund companies like ourselves, to give us the loans that we can then turn around and lend to others. So those that have come in are coming in at higher rates. They're coming down, which is great, and we're going to see them come down. And that will also bring our lending rates down. But it's taking some time. So when we look at where we're getting our funding from, it's usually high net worth individuals or players that are already in the crypto space, and their access to capital is better than ours, and they're making a decent yield on it. But those are coming down, and our rates will come down with it, as will all lenders in the space.
Gotcha. And this is a great question too, as well. So I did want to bring up a couple topics, right? So John, and we've heard sailors say this over and over and over and over again, and I want to get your thoughts on it. The idea that Bitcoin is pristine collateral. What does that mean?
Well, when you look at the other collateral that's used in the traditional financial marketplace, it's going to be stocks, it's going to be your house, it's going to be some other asset you have. It may be your car for a car loan. And you think of the challenge if there is a failure of the loan, so that person doesn't make their car payment. You need to repossess their car. You need to then try and sell the car. You have no idea whether the car has been maintained, so you have no idea whether that collateral value is what you thought it was. If your house gets repossessed, government needs to try, or the bank needs to try and sell your house. And depending on what's happening in the real estate market, that may be very difficult to do. If it's a stock price or a stock that you're posting as collateral, that stock only trades from 9:30 in the morning to 4:30 in the afternoon, Monday to Friday in your time zone, whatever country you're in. And so if there's a failure on the loan, you have to go out and try and sell that stock, but it could be that loan failure could happen at Friday afternoon at 5:00, and so you then have to wait until the next week to be able to sell that, and you don't know what's going to happen to that stock price. With Bitcoin, it's 24/7, 365. It's very deep liquidity. You're going to be able to liquidate that collateral if you need to. It's very quick to be able to top up collateral because it's on the blockchain. So it's not like you have to go into your bank and send a wire to add more collateral, etc. It's just perfect collateral that you don't have to. You're not at risk of price gaps because of market being closed. It's very, very easy because one Bitcoin in Latin America is exactly the same as one Bitcoin in the UK. So you don't have to worry about local markets and what that means for that asset. The collateral is pristine. It's the best collateral that's ever been in existence. And so that's what Sailor's talking about with pristine collateral. It makes it very, very safe to lend against.
That's incredible. It almost sounds like if it's pristine collateral, it almost sounds like the industry is in its infancy. Could you talk a little bit about that, John?
Oh, it definitely is in its infancy. So when you look at, I've referred to mortgages a couple times now because that's another asset class that people really understand that they can borrow against. 60% of houses in North America have a mortgage against them. If you look at Bitcoin and how much Bitcoin has been posted as collateral for loans, That number is somewhere around 1%, maybe as high as 2%, but there's no there's no central data collection point where you can really find that out. But if you think about that, we think that the Bitcoin retail loan market right now is somewhere around $2 billion. If that grows to the same point as the mortgage market, think about 60% of all Bitcoin having a loan against it. That's a huge opportunity in the marketplace, and it's huge untapped capital that people will then have to spend and spend into their economy. So it's there's a huge opportunity here to help people that don't know that this is available, but also to create an economic impact, which is going to be really, really positive.
Absolutely. So where can they go to learn more about this? So let's say they're not familiar with this. They're like, okay, wait a second. So I'm just going to send my Bitcoin to this platform. Like, where could people get educated? So they go to ledn.io. Where could they find more information?
So Ledn.io, we have a lot of educational tools on there, and we think that it's super important for people to be educated. Just like if you're getting involved in any kind of financial product, you should have full understanding of what it is. So if you go onto Ledn.io, we have a lot of videos, we have a lot of tutorials that really help you to understand exactly how this works. And there's also, we've got lots of podcasts that we've been on. If you just look up my name, John Glover, Ledn News, you'll see a whole lot of different articles that have been written and interviews that I've done. Same thing with Maurizio. Maurizio has been called Because of Bitcoin, which is a lot of really good educational materials in there. So yeah, there's a lot of good places to go to, but Ledn.io is a great starting point for that.
Absolutely. And then I saw someone in the comments, just want to go through some of these. So first up from Winston Alexander says, I have some loans with Ledn since early 2024, just reduced some excess collateral pretty fast. Also, the custodial rate slightly came down for newer loans to 13% in New Jersey. Want to pull up this one from SpongeBob SquarePants with a Z. Loans should be offered at longer terms, not just 1 year. So I believe, and John, please correct me if I'm wrong here. I believe that there's an automatic rollover. Is that correct?
Yeah. So all of our loans are 1 year term, but they can be repaid at any time. So there's huge flexibility in the loans and repaid at any time without penalty. You can roll those loans at the maturity date, and you don't have to even repay the interest that's owed. You can roll that into the principal of the new loan and keep doing that ad infinitum if you wish to. So it's not a beyond a 1 year loan to start with, but you can continue rolling that. And we've had people that have been rolling the same loan for 5 years. So it's it's up to you how long you want to remain within that loan. SpongeBob's been quite active on the chat, and so it's interesting that he wants a longer term loan because he's not a big fan of the loans at all from what he's been talking about.
So I forgot to,
I like that kind of discourse.
I forgot to tell you before we go live, because usually Opti does this, but the Simply Bitcoin chat box is notoriously the troll box. So I forgot to tell you that, but yes, our chat box is quite lively. So I do see some people in the chat mentioning that Ledn is not available in certain states. So I saw California, I saw Tennessee, I think was another one. Are you guys planning to expand to different states, especially with the Trump administration going into power?
We are. So we're in the process right now of expanding into California and into New York. It takes time because each one of the states has different requirements and different regulatory hurdles to get over. So we're moving as quickly as we can to be in as many states as we're possibly able to. We'd love to be in every single state immediately, but it just takes time and resources.
Yeah, no, I can imagine the regulatory hurdle must be must be big. I do want to read the poll. So we dropped a poll about half an hour ago. I said, "Do you believe the Bitcoin bull run is over?" 377 of you guys voted. 91% of you guys voted no, and 9% of you guys voted yes. I'm going to end that poll. Sophie, do you have any thoughts or questions for John regarding Ledn?
I was actually going to ask if there's a limit to how many times you can roll it over, but if it goes below 50% of, the price that you...
So the loan to value ratio is, if it goes above 80%, then they liquidate. And I believe you guys send out a warning at 70%. Is that correct?
We'll send out a warning at 70, and we'll continue sending out those warnings as long as it's above 70%. About at 80%, it'll be liquidated. So you can keep rolling, Sophie, as long as you want to, as long as you have sufficient collateral in there, or if you top up collateral to allow yourself to continue. But yeah, there's no limit to how many times you can do that. And there's really no limit to how much you can borrow either. We've got loans. Our average loan size is around $30,000, but $500 is our minimum loan size. And we've got loans that are as big as $7 million. So it's, it's really for everybody, regardless of where you are. It's giving you access to some capital against your Bitcoin collateral.
So if you had to time when would be the best time to get a loan?
I don't think you can answer that. But
well, yeah, I can't.
I don't
know. However, there's two products that we have, Sophie, which I think really kind of leads into the question you had. One is our just standard loan. You put up your collateral and you borrow dollars and you use it for whatever you want to use it for, whether that's go on a vacation or buy a car or whatever. The other one is called B2X, and in that case, you put up your Bitcoin. We issue a loan in that same amount, and we use that to buy more Bitcoin. So you end up with a 50% loan to value, because let's say you put up half a Bitcoin, we give you half a Bitcoin worth of dollars, so call it $45,000, another half a Bitcoin. So now you've got a full Bitcoin against your $45,000 loan. So you're at about a 50% LTV. So that allows you to double your Bitcoin. And what our clients use that for is when they believe that Bitcoin is going to rally again, then they start doing B2X loans. And when it rallies and hits whatever their target is, they repay that loan by selling that additional Bitcoin that they got, and they still have their core holding. So, the question as to when is the right time to take out a loan, most of our loans, the vast majority of our loans are just people who need it when they need it. And that's for, paying a bill or going on a vacation or buying a house or whatever it may be. But with B2X, people are using that opportunistically. We see a lot of activity when there's a new high set. So people think it's going to really rally quickly. So we see a lot of people entering B2X then. And also when we see a dip and it starts to bounce. So we're starting to see a lot of B2Xs now, after we saw that move down into the kind of high 70,000s that are now having, rallying back up. And with all this news, I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see a lot more activity in that area. And to your poll, Nico, we are nowhere near the end.
Oh man, it's this bull has definitely been underwhelming. So I hope there's
slow. Just a little slow.
Oh, has it really been underwhelming? Look we were $15,000 only 2 years ago. That's not an underwhelming bull run. That's a pretty damn good bull run. But we've got a lot more room to go.
Absolutely. So, yeah, guys, appreciate you guys tuning in to Simply Bitcoin Live today for March 14th, 2025. I'm your host, Nico. This is my co-host for today, my beautiful wife, Internet Sophie, and our special guest for today, John Glover in the house. John Glover is the CIO of Ledn. Ledn is a partner of Simply Bitcoin. I personally used them before they were a partner. They're freaking awesome. Head over to ledn.io to find out more information. Guys, of course, smash the like button and have an amazing weekend. And John, if you can hang out backstage, we're going to wrap up the show. Take care, everybody.
Today's episode was brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.